Welcome to our seminar this morning, First Time Fans, a Conversation About Legacy. My name is Bianca Gaetan-Burrell. I am a graduate of the class of 98, and I'm also the current chair of the Hispanic Alumni, and I serve on the National Association Board. And I don't know if you noticed, this is actually co-sponsored by the Notre Dame Club of Los Angeles, as well as the Diversity Council, which has the beautiful little flyers that we have and the posters out in front. So what is a Diversity Council? It's actually an affinity group of the Alumni Association that supports the university's mission on diversity on and off campus with events like this. Our mission mirrors the inscription that's on the base of Jesus. Jesus sits in front of the dome that says, his arms open, I make omens, which means come to me all. But why do we have affinity groups? Well, don't we all bleed blue and gold? And yes, of course we do. But our history, the history of Black, Latino, Asian, and Native American students is unique, and events like this recognize our contribution to the university. The visibility of groups that, like the Diversity Council, allows people who don't look like the average Notre Dame student, who never thought that ND was for them, make them realize that this is possible, that they too can create their own ND story, their own legacy. What though the odds? And now, it's my honor to introduce today's panelist, Ted Mandell. He has taught film and video production at Notre Dame for the past 28 years. He is a graduate of the class of '86 and received his Master's of Arts from University of Iowa. He specializes in documentary production and has produced numerous films, including the First Time Fan series. He's also the author of the multimedia book, Heartstoppers and Hail Marys, the greatest college football finishes. Christine Swanson is a graduate of the class of '94, earning her bachelor's in communication in Japanese. She also earned her Master of Fine Arts in Film from the prestigious Tisch School of Arts at NYU. She is an acclaimed director, screenwriter, and along with her husband own the production company Faith Filmworks. Michael Swanson is a '93 grad, earned his bachelor in film and television. He is an Emmy award-winning producer and studio executive. And y'all, if I sit here and list all of the TV shows and films that they have worked on, it would take a really long time. But they're all fantastic, and I really want you guys to start with the film. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ted.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks for coming this morning. And did you guys all run the Sunburst? 10K? You didn't run the Sunburst? I felt guilty when I was walking out. I was like, oops, I forgot. I just want to introduce the First Time Fan series, tell you a little bit about it, and then we'll talk to Christine and Michael about the film and show the film. First Time Fans is a series that I started 4 years ago in conjunction with basically 3 entities on campus: the Alumni Association, the College of Arts and Letters, and the Department of Athletics. And the idea was to use the great fan base of Notre Dame athletics as a platform to tell Notre Dame stories that really don't have anything to do with sports, but we use sports as kind of a backdrop. I've kind of described it as that show Fantasy Island, remember, from 1970s, with Ricardo Montalban and Hervé Villachez. The idea is you just bring somebody to campus who's never been here before and show them a Notre Dame experience, but in the process we find out much more about the subject and who they are as a person, and how who they are matches the mission of the university. So the idea was to bring back our esteemed alumni and very talented alumni and give them basically a canvas to paint on a weekend of Notre Dame football, which most of us are pretty familiar with, all the things that happen here. I also wanted to connect our current undergraduates with our alumni. So in each one of these films, and we've done 12 of them so far, in each one of these films, the production model is an alum comes in and works with our current students who are just learning about documentary production, and they work with them over the weekend and find out a lot about the production model, how to make documentaries, how to pull it all together. And then I basically allow our great and talented alums to run with it. And hopefully by the end, we come up with some really unique filmmaking. And the idea is that it is truly unique. It's not a marketing tool. It doesn't look like an advertisement for Notre Dame, even though it really is an advertisement for Notre Dame and the people who work for Notre Dame. It's all based, if you ever have a chance to see a 1972 documentary called Visions of 8. That's kind of where I got the idea. It's a documentary about the 1972 Olympics where they gave 8 really esteemed filmmakers a camera and said, go make a 10-minute film about the Olympics. One was on weightlifting, one was on swimming and diving. They were all artistically completely different. But when you look at them as a whole, you get a real sense of what sports and athletics mean on a different level. And I think I really would encourage you after you guys get back to your homes to take a look at the 12 first-time fans films and think of it in that terms, and that none of these films are alike. They're all completely different, but yet they all have a real spirit to them, and that I think permeates through the university and what we do and who we are. So I'd like to introduce Christine and Michael to introduce the film. We'll show the film and then we'll get into discussion. So former student Christine Swanson.
Ted was really our professor, so
it looks the same.
I taught
exactly
them
the same.
Nothing. They learned it all after they got out of here.
Well, we were pleasantly honored to create a piece for Notre Dame. So when Ted gave us the mandate, and he's in very few parameters, really, he was like, do whatever you want. I just thought, I can maybe use this opportunity to bring all my kids to Notre Dame to check it out and invite my friends to do it with me. So using that, we created this piece about legacy from a perspective of African-American students, and then introducing this vast university and vast concept of Notre Dame to our children. So I thought of 4 of my classmates who graduated with me or went to Notre Dame with us, who also had 4 kids like us. And I thought, what if we brought all of our kids to campus and kind of hung out with them for the weekend? So that initially was the concept for Legacy. And I had the very great fortune of having an Uber producer to help me, who I happen to sleep with every night. So, which is how you move up in our industry. But we were able to do this together. So.
I can't add anything to that.
Should we watch the film?
Yeah,
Sure.
We'll watch the film and then we'll discuss it afterward.
Welcome to the University of Notre Dame!
It was pretty cool seeing you guys, back in the day. I'm sure it's very different than it is now. I know we went around campus and we saw a lot of our parents' dormitories, and I don't know, it's kind of cool.
See how you guys lived during college, to see how close you guys were.
So this is Dylan Hall. I was here all 4 years. Thanks, Luke. Look at that. This is Father Hesburgh and Martin Luther King when they were marching for civil rights.
Sometimes I wish I could recapture is that feeling of invincibility, in a sense, that we had, safety and invincibility that we had here.
I remember I heard Coach Holtz give a speech, and he cited the need that every human being walking the face of the earth has. And chief among those needs was the need for significance.
backfield down around the 5-yard line. The kick will come down, and Gibb will take it. Takes it at the 12, 15, 20, 25. He's at the 30. Afterburners are on. He's gone. 40, 45, 50. Down the sideline at the 35. A race to the goal line at the 10, the 5. A touchdown. Irish.
Just being at an institution like Notre Dame, it was important to y'all. You could definitely tell it was a different energy. You know what I mean? Like it was, I don't know, just the way y'all even took pictures, it was almost like excellent.
So they are idealizing what our time here was.
He has been just very emotional since he's been here. I think he's just taking it in and really, for the first time, understanding like his dad's path and the footstep. I don't think he ever saw it before, but there's like a gratefulness that he's had since we've been here. Just being thankful and recognizing that it wasn't as easy as he thought it was. And not just for Ragged, but for all of you, how, you know, it was only a few of you and you kind of had to stick together.
Going to a predominantly Caucasian school, it was probably a little bit of a culture shock. And you know, it definitely, you almost have no choice but to reach out to what you know. You know, you have no choice but to be like, okay, that's a familiar face. Regardless if I know that person or not, I know we relate in some kind of way. And like I said, you could definitely see the fruits of y'all's labor in front of us. So I think it's a real beautiful thing. You can definitely feel the energy, even in the pictures, you know. And even look at my dad, it's like, you know, it just makes you want to work a little bit harder, you know, so I can, you know, open doors for my kids like he has, so, and like y'all have, so, most definitely.
This is the Heisman, very prestigious award. Notre Dame has won 2, 4, 6, 7 of them. My neighbor in Dallas, Texas, Tim Brown, was the last to win it, and I suspect we're gonna have a lot more to come in the future.
I think it's fair to say that we all want that recognition that our parents get, you know, whether it's, you know, doctor, director, athlete, artist, whatever the case is. I feel like we all want to walk in the room and be like, hey, that's, you know, isn't that what's the name right there? And like watching people come to my dad is something new every day. Just like I've seen grown men cry because of the impact that my dad has had. So I feel like I have no choice but to be that. Like I want that, you know what I'm saying? I know my sister wants that. I know y'all want that to, you know, to be able to say, hey, mom and dad, this is what y'all did and this is what I did with it.
The first thing Spike Lee said when he came to campus was, where's Rocket Ishmael?
Like, man, Spike Lee, bro, I gotta finish this paper. He's like, no, you gotta come now. My association here even makes people think higher of me than I at times think of myself. If I say something that happens to make sense or be smart at a time, a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, he went to Notre Dame, okay. Like the fact that I was an athlete, or the fact that just the standard in culture for athletes when it comes to anything intellectual is the bar is so low, like they like the reason I'm not meeting that low bar but exceeding it is because I went to Notre Dame.
I definitely feel a pressure. You know, my mom coming from Detroit and my dad from the south side of Chicago, I think, you know, they weren't expected to go to a university like this, like Notre Dame, you know. I think it wasn't really common, and so they definitely worked hard to get where they are now. And so me living a more privileged life than they did, you know, I think there's definitely a pressure that I always have to just do my best and, you know, make them proud, because they went through a lot for me to get to where I am. And of course, when I'm older, I'd like to give back to them. They sacrifice so much for us, and I think we take it for granted sometimes.
That little bit of push that keeps that drive in you so you don't get lazy, so you keep pushing harder, I think that's needed. I think pressure's needed.
Keith and I were the first African Americans to graduate as biochemistry majors at Notre Dame. We were the first ones. And it was...
What were we thinking?
What were we thinking? I know, I always trying to do the most.
Yeah.
But
pre-med wasn't hard enough.
Yeah, we were like, no, you know what, we're gonna be biochemistry majors. Us knowing that no other African Americans had come through that major, I felt a greater responsibility to do it. Because it was tough, and it was like, why am I doing this? But I felt a sense of, I wanted to pave the way to make sure that some other kid would know, you know, if they did it, you can do it.
When I came to Notre Dame, it was really just an extension of the faith that I got from home. So it became, although I had never gone to college before, I understood what the grotto was all about.
Yeah.
I'm not Catholic, but I went there to pray.
Right.
You know, it was to see a cross in every classroom was important, so I could relate to that.
There's a real sense of faith. Absolutely. You know, not everybody every single day, but you know and we know that service, mission, God and faith is real. Mm-hmm. And on some level as parents, that's a real legacy.
It didn't take long for me to understand that once I became a part of this community, I was treated like family. And I think it's important, especially for Black students, you have to navigate. It's not easy.
No, it's not.
Definitely not easy, but you do have to take a step. And I got involved in a lot of things, and I really created my path.
One of the best things that honestly that happened to me is I met this particular guy who actually recruited me to come to Notre Dame. Like, I would have gone to Michigan because I was from Detroit, but I met him early enough and I just watched him navigate. Yeah. And I just didn't know any different. I'm like, oh, that's what you do? You know? So I actually copied him for a long time. And there was a sense of fearlessness because someone else went ahead of me. Mm-hmm. So it's like legacy, but short, you know what I mean? It's like new legacy for me. So now we've become legacy for our children. Part of the reason why that we're all here, we all have 4 kids.
We do.
We're not even Catholic.
Yeah.
So what is that, you know?
I'm the first person in my family to go to college, and I remember a lot of my classmates here in my first year here at Notre Dame talked about, oh, my granddad went here, my dad went here, my uncles went here, my brothers went here, my sister, and it's like, wow, all of this history and legacy. And, you know, even back then I thought it would be cool if one of my children went here one day.
I mean, I'm sure back when you were going to school here, it was very much white, predominantly white. And so you guys stuck together and you know, like Rocket said, it's like you guys are a family. And I think that's what's really important.
My parents love me unconditionally because, like, even when I had, like, the worst attitude or act, like, totally the worst, they would, you know, kind of not get super angry with me, but, like help me through it instead of just tell me how bad I was, you know.
No matter what I do, my parents will, like, support me. But knowing what they did, that makes me want to succeed. So even if they don't really, I know they won't stop loving me no matter what I do, but even with that, that'll still push me to do even better.
And how could we not want this for our children?
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
We were just pounding the pavement. We were just doing what we were supposed to be doing. You were like running fast. That's what you were supposed to be doing. We just got to do it at a great institution at the highest level.
I want my children to aim even higher than me, whatever that is, and you know, but really aim happy, aim higher, but aim for happy.
Whatever it is that you guys feel burdened, there is no burden that you can't overcome. There's no expectation. Just receive what we give you in love. Remember, it's a difference between people giving you advice that love you and people who kind of like you.
This is really just about celebrating these children and to honor this pathway. And hopefully you'll follow in our footsteps and just continue to shine and be examples of the wonderful families that you come from. So this is a toast. Thank you. And God bless us all. Cheers. Cheers.
I'll get started, Christine. I'll ask you, legacy is a word that we hear a lot about at Notre Dame, but it's usually in terms of white legacy. And in this case, it's about black families and black legacy. Can you talk a little bit about what made you have that decision to kind of pursue that subject?
We have a rising senior in high school. And as we are about to start the college application process, we just started really think about our experiences here and how we really wanted at least one of our kids to go to Notre Dame. And more than just continuing our legacy, it's really to benefit from the experiences that we got to benefit from. And how do you encapsulate that in a substantive way? So being filmmakers, this was kind of like our attempt to kind of capture that in a way that resonated first to our children and then to the community at large. What do you think?
Why hasn't there been, Notre Dame students, I believe it's been about 70 years that black students have come to Notre Dame. Why hasn't there been anything documented or produced or marketed about black legacies at Notre Dame?
Well, we do have the Black Alumni of Notre Dame, and I remember when I participated in some of the events that they sponsored, they mentioned Fraser Thompson, who was the first African-American alumnus from the university, and he was celebrated. And I think for me that was really important to discuss Fraser Thompson and his legacy, and as I mentioned in the film, as a student, of course, a lot of my classmates had relatives who went here, but for me, Fraser Thompson was one of the first persons that made it clear that, wow, we do go way back here, and there is this opportunity to continue that and have our children attend the university. But so that's one way that it's been documented, but you're right, it hasn't been done on a wider scale, and I hope our film legacy does that and makes it more accessible to not only black alumni, but alumni of all colors to say, this can happen, we're part of this. We're part of this family, and our children and their children can also be a part of this legacy.
But the reality of this institution is that it's primarily white, Catholic, and used to be mostly male. Oh, Irish. Okay. Clearly, we are not white, Irish, or Catholic. We're not Catholic. But I always felt this about Notre Dame, like the glue that tied us in a way that is kind of universal was faith-driven. We grew up in very faith-based homes, and we always felt that we could connect to Notre Dame from that level and nothing else mattered. So that really is the thing that's really important, I feel like, for our families and our children, is that we continue the legacy of faith in our beliefs, in our mission, and in our servitude. And that's more important to me than, oh, it's a great academic institution, because there are a lot of great academic institutions, but to me, not at the level of faith at which we embrace our beliefs and in which we act it out in our service. That is what I love most about Notre Dame. So while it's difficult for people who look like us to be here, that is the glue I feel that ties us all together, that transcends ethnicity and specific religion. So I think there's a connection. I just think our history here as people of color is shorter, but we hope to, you know, open it up more in a way where it seems accessible by talking about our own experiences.
You know, I think one of the things that I have always thought about on the First Time Fan series is the image and the cliche, if you want to say, of athletics at Notre Dame, and how, in some ways, to some audiences, the accessibility into black students is through black student athletes. That when you think of black alumni at Notre Dame, when you think of, you're thinking of football players, you're thinking of, and I kind of really, I love how you, I don't want to say destroy that model, but the idea of taking what we consider to be, what I consider to be hero worship, as a way of kind of like showing athletics, where we build up our student athletes as if they are some kind of demigods, or when I know teaching them that they're 17 and 18-year-old kids. Yeah. But to humanize them and then show, you know, that number one, our alumni who are athletes are people. Yeah. They're not this kind of video game person, right? They're actual people. And secondly, that there's a whole other group of people who aren't athletes, right? And I think for a white audience, that's really, really important. And I don't know if that was going through your mind when you're editing or shooting the film. You talk a little bit about that aspect of it?
Well, because it was done through the athletic department, and a lot of this was supposed to showcase football, I thought, you know, I happened to go to school with like one of the greatest football players to come out of this university, who happens to be a great friend to us. I'm buddies with his wife, and I know Rocket outside of football. And I thought that would be so cool to bring him back, and he happens to have 4 kids. When we were students here, my husband being 6'4", he was always asked for his autograph. Like, as a black male, certainly you're here because you're an athlete. That's kind of bad, actually, but...
And I signed them, too.
He did. He did. But there's nothing you can do about that, because that's the stereotype that's rampant here.
And it still is.
It still is. So if you're a black student, if you're a black male, and if you're a tall black male, then you're only here because of your contributions athletically. So that's good and bad, whatever. But the awesome thing is, you take somebody like Rocket Ishmael, who was like an uber athlete, and then you showcase him differently with his family, and we know him as an uber human being, you know? So it was like my pleasure to showcase him and his family in this way, so that, you know, I think the community at large, the Notre Dame community, you get to see another side of Rocket and his family. Like, he was a superstar to us, and then, like, if I could do another version of this, there's this whole underlying theme of trying to rise up to the level of your father. And that's what his son is trying to do, who, according to Rocket, is a better athlete than he was, but has not achieved the level of success that his father has achieved athletically, at least not yet. So when Rocket's son came to campus, everything that he saw that his father experienced and witnessed, I could not walk Rocket anywhere without him being stopped for autographs and photos. He was Michael Jackson, you know? And for his son to watch that and to see what he meant to a community, like, it broke him. Like, we were in the South Dining Hall, and at a certain point, his son was sitting there eating, just broke out in tears. And when we kind of unraveled that a little bit, it just turns out that, because he was at a junior college trying to make it as a football player, and he was like, at junior college, we don't even have real scrambled eggs, you know? And he's like, and this is what I should be doing, but I'm not where my father was. So that was just devastating to watch. So what I think we tried to do was to humanize athletes as people, because that's honestly how we know Rocket, you know? Like, when we were students here, we knew him at, like, you know, like everyone else kind of did. Like, the athletes were super friendly when we were here. So I don't know what they're like now, but they didn't.
You're still super friendly.
Yeah, they didn't act like rock stars, right? And so we only kind of knew him like that, and then we grew in friendship later after college. So we only know him as a father and a friend now, post NFL. So I guess we did that. We touched that, and we showed that athletes are people too, I suppose. But collectively, we were just all parents. And that's pretty universal, I think, for most of us.
I think it's, you know, I see that daily here, which was what I like about the film, that unfortunately it takes 30 years for people to look at athletes as real people. You think about that. I mean, I'm not saying everybody, but you think about a culture that looks at Notre Dame football players and looks at Notre Dame athletes. When they look at it from the outside, they're looking at them as athletes. They don't look at them as a real person. I see them in class of 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, right? Yeah. They're real human beings. And typically in filmmaking, it takes 30 years to remove that person from the field before the audience can start to see them as a real person. Yeah. It would be really great if instead of we build these student athletes when they're 17, 18, 19, and, you know, as these ultra, you know, athletic gods, and start treating them visually as human beings, because they are great, super nice people. We don't see that side of them. We see the polished NBC side, the polished ethics. And it's not just Notre Dame, obviously. It's the entire culture that we live in.
Well, when you look at people and you only look at them for the value that they bring to someplace or to yourself, then it becomes a selfish endeavor, right? I feel on some level, this is not an institution that does that from jump. It seems like athletically and academically, there's a more holistic approach to how we treat people, and a lot of that stems from community. And that's what I really appreciate about Notre Dame, and that's why I think we have a great alumni network, because we see each other as community, or we should, more so than your average institution of this stature.
One of the reasons we became friends with so many athletes is because the university does a good job of incorporating them into our student life. You know, they live with us in our dorms, we eat together at the dining halls, we study together, you know, when they're not practicing or when they don't have their own obligations through sports. So the university really does try to treat them like student athletes and really put an emphasis on the student part. And I think that's how, from early in our college days, they became normal for us, because, you know, we saw them as classmates.
Can you talk a little bit about those early college days? Because when you came from the Detroit area, right?
In Chicago.
In Chicago. Mm-hmm. That's a whole different, your world outside of this university had to have been a complete culture shock when you got here. Much more, I mean, it is now, but I mean, go back 25 years or whatever, it must have been even more so. I mean, we're much more diverse, if you look at the numbers, I think, admissions-wise now than we were back then. But still, from a cultural perspective, from what how you grew up to throwing yourself into this bowl, fishbowl here, what was that like? And how did that change you?
It was very different for me because unlike some of my classmates here at Notre Dame didn't get on my radar until my first semester of my senior year of high school. And I attended a Catholic high school in Chicago, and a few of my teachers had graduated from Notre Dame, but I didn't think I would apply, or even, it wasn't on my list. I was gonna maybe go to a black college because A Different World was really popular on television back then. But my teacher, one in particular, Brendan Conroy, encouraged me to apply to Notre Dame. And now this was fall of 1980. This was right after they won the 1988 championship. And that was probably the worst time to apply because everybody was applying to the school. But he encouraged me to apply. And because of that, I did more research about the school and never visited, but I talked to my teachers who had attended even more about the school. And I felt that it would be a good fit for me. And I applied regular action. The #1 student in my high school, the valedictorian, applied early action, and he didn't get admitted. And that really freaked me out. Because I was like ranked 5 or something in my class, but for some reason I knew that I was supposed to come to the school. So then I had to wait another couple of months, praying that I would get admitted, and I got in, and then I visited for the first time, and that was probably, I don't know, I guess it was March of my senior year, and that sealed it for me. I walked around campus and hadn't really visited a university like this before. It was all new to me, very different from my environment in Chicago, but I felt home. And I think it goes back to what Christine said. The reason I felt like this was home to me was because of the spiritual aspect. And it was very familiar to me. And I probably couldn't put my finger on it, but I just felt like I would be a part of something that was greater than me. And a lot of that had to do with how important faith was here on this campus and how it was woven into the fabric of the place. As I mentioned in the film, there's crosses everywhere. I felt like even if I lost my way here, I knew how to stay connected to God and my faith and pray, and that gave me comfort because this was all new territory for me. Going to a big university, going to college, period. In my family, that was new to all of us. But I felt that if I could navigate this and have my faith strengthened by being able to go to the grotto and pray, or not even feeling ashamed of my faith because everybody was kind of on the same page, I felt that I could succeed here. And that was one of many reasons why I decided to attend.
Mm-hmm. Well, and me being from Detroit, my father was 27 years in the military, in the Air Force. So I was a little bit of a military brat. Mm-hmm. And then he worked in a heat processing plant as a foreman. So he's very blue collar kind of guy. I grew up in inner city Detroit. This was totally foreign to me. And most of my classmates, their parents had already gone to college. So I'm first generation going to college. And I think all that our parents expected of us was that we graduate, and the fact that we just made it to a school like Notre Dame was enough. And so I didn't feel the pressures that I kind of sensed from my classmates who were like legacy kids. Like the expectations for them were higher, right? I get it now because I have kids, And the expectations for my kids are way higher than they were for my own. So this is my son there who's all nervous about like, well, I know I have to do more and I have to make my parents proud. Now I get it. Now I get it. And part of it came through making this film and putting our children in that place and watching them be us, you know, when we were here, and us, just the expectations are different, and the outcomes are going to be different as well, because unlike us, on some level, because we're Notre Dame grads, you know, we're able to afford them a level of privilege that we didn't have, you know. So now it's like, what do you do with your privilege? Not, boy, you're lucky to be this person. No, that's not how we look at things. You know, we look at it from the point of view of, look what God is giving you. What are you going to do with that? That matters to someone else. That is what I learned having come here, gone through here, and now being an alum 25 years later, that our greatest legacy is not so much what we can do for our own children, but what can we do for one another that goes above and beyond our own selfish needs. And I feel like we're in a climate now where it's going to mean more to be a Notre Dame grad because we see things differently, or we should. And we should always be more missional. And that's the kind of thing that I want to instill in my children. If it's all about you and your comfort and your privilege, then we have failed as parents. And we have failed as an institution if those are the kind of people that we're putting out. Because we're Notre Dame, beyond the athletic element of it, which actually puts us on a global map on some level, there's so much more that we are because of the institution that we come from. You know, and that's what I'm always trying to unpack in my work and in my life and in my children and in my mission. It's always missional. So that's, you know, it's a long journey from inner city Detroit to, we live in Pasadena now. It's like, could not be more different from how we grew up. But I'm always mindful of what it is that God afforded me so that I can then use it to be a blessing to someone else.
You know, let's take some questions from the esteemed audience. Anybody have some questions you'd like to throw out, or we can continue the conversation here? Anybody questions about the series or about Christine or Michael or their kids? You can talk about their kids, yeah.
Christine, you mentioned a little bit about, you know, you had so much to say in this short period of time in this film. You talked a little bit about like what you would like to explore a little bit beyond it. What are those? And you mentioned a little bit, you touched upon a little bit, but if you could explain a little bit more about it.
Well, I can kind of, each of my kids, I can tell a different story. My oldest son is probably more creative than all of us, like right here. And as he's looking at Notre Dame, he's also looking at like an NYU or USC. And I'm always trying to make a case for, it's bigger than just, academics, So that's his journey. My second son, who's 15 years old, he's an 8th grader. He's 6'6", 290 pounds. Like, the football team is already recruiting him. So it's like legacy in a different sense. Like, he could be a student athlete here, and what would that world look like for him? And, how could he navigate that from being, he's legacy. Like, how many football players are legacy typically, right? And he's also an African-American male. What a unique position to be in. And, and then I can go, each of my kids, they're a separate story. Then you take each of the couples, So Michael and I started out as, now they call it FTT majors. And back then, it was just a hole in the wall, like
O'Shaughnessy Hall.
Yeah, in O'Shaughnessy.
The loft.
It was in the loft, and it was such a small major. And now it's one of the fastest growing majors here at Notre Dame, So we could have just talked about that. We could have talked about Michael, who actually started out at Notre Dame as like a government major. He wanted to be a senator. He went to Princeton Theological Seminary. He wanted to go to Harvard Law School, but now he's an executive at NBC Universal and television. So it's a, how do you go from that to that? So this is a storyteller in me. Like there's always a story in whatever angle you want to look at. You know, so we could have gone on and on and on. I actually thought I had 30 minutes to tell this story. And Ted's like, no, it's more like 13. And I'm like, you know, I had like a 25-minute cut. I'm like, Ted, here it is. He's like, that's great. Now, cut it down. I'm like, so I had to cut so much story out. And just what you saw was what I had to turn in. But it could have gone on and on and on and on.
It's funny, it's because of the culture that we're in.
Yeah.
If you think about the content, and I ask my students the content, how long can you sit and watch something? Or like a film like this, which fits perfectly in the kind of venue that we're in.
Right.
We live in a culture now where, you know, to get somebody, it's an incredibly important message and story that you're telling, to get that out there, you have to kind of finagle it in such a way so it fits the model in which the venue that you're actually going to distribute it in. So yeah, I mean, I think you could probably make a 60-minute film out of that. It's just so much great content with great subject matter. Other questions? Yeah.
I don't really have a question, but I just want to say thank you to both of you for doing this and for your friends who came forward to tell their stories. The story that so many of us as first-generation students can relate to. Not only does it take me back to the time when we were students, but it also brings home very much so, you know, as a parent and with my own kids, although they're only 8 and 9 only, but you know, soon they'll be 18. So it's just all very important things for us to think about and very timely having it here at Reunion. So thank you both.
To add on to that, actually the second film, this was the first film out of the 3 that we did this year. The second film was also about a first-generation Hispanic student from California. So it's called El Primero. The student's name is escaping me now. It's Armando. I forget his last name. Armando. He's a Bryce scholar, whatever scholar. But take a look online. It's und.com/first-time-fans is where the entire series is. And the series spans a lot of different subjects and subject matters, from a first-time rector here to a blind 8th grade student who's never been to a football game, to it's just a really great collection of films, and it's great because it's the alumni who are making it and deciding, the idea is, what does Notre Dame mean to you? And giving you that canvas rather than to try to fit you into a template, make the films all look the same. So in many ways, the films really are, none of them are the same. But if you look at them holistically, they all have a very Notre Dame feel to them. And I try to spread them around to as many non-Notre Dame people as possible. I mean, I think it's really important, which I think this film really connects to, is that if you can make a person love Notre Dame who hates Notre Dame, whether for any reason or whatever, whether it's athletically or then you've succeeded. So in many ways, the target audience is not the current alumni, or the target audience is somebody who doesn't really know anything about Notre Dame, or can see Notre Dame from a different aspect and a different angle, which I think this film masterfully does.
What was also cool was that Ted put a lot of the current FTT students on the film. And I mean, they were driving the carts or running errands, and a lot of, what I loved was that we had a lot of women, like as PAs or production assistants. And part of what is difficult, like in this industry, is breaking through. Like we were discussing, like unlike any other industry, like if you go to law school, typically you get a job as a lawyer and then you work your way up, right? And in the entertainment industry, it's not a meritocracy. And it doesn't matter how good you are, how smart you are. It's like you just have to know somebody who's gonna bring you in and give you a break to work hard for 10 years before you make it. So it's just kind of backwards like that. So the cool thing was that we had a lot of women and young men, and half the times it's helpful to see something modeled, right? So when I came up as a student, I just didn't see a lot of women directors. So it was very intimidating for me to get into this field initially. And in Ted's class even, I was scared like every single day. He didn't know this because I put on a brave front, but I didn't know what was happening in the class. I really didn't understand the technical aspects of it. And I just was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this, you know? And fortunately at Notre Dame, there's also like a film theory track, right? So I ended up taking a lot of those classes, and I loved the conversation surrounding images and films and just digging into that. So that was my way into it. But I say all that to say it was great for other kids to see us working, right? Because then you can see like, oh, that's what it looks like, and I can aspire to that. And that's why I think this series is really great, because it gives students exposure and access to real working professionals who are back on campus. And some of those kids, I think one of the girls who was a PA, Geraldine Smith, through some help by Michael, I would say, went through the application process and got selected to be an NBC page out of how many applications? Like, you can talk about that.
Yeah, thousands.
Thousands of applications.
Yeah, and that's one, and we love to come back and talk to students who are in FTT, because it gives us an opportunity to stay connected, but more importantly, it gives them access to us, people who are working in the industry. And when they come to Los Angeles on their spring breaks, we meet with them, we have them over to our house, and really to encourage them and to give them advice and help them get jobs, which is ultimately what everyone needs, because it is difficult to break into our business, and it's a very close-knit industry. But Notre Dame students and Notre Dame alumni are very necessary, you know, in our industry, because they bring something that they may not understand at a young age that is very important to have in our industry, and that is this again, it goes back to faith. It's like it's important for, and I tell this to the students who come out and look for jobs, it's important to not compare yourself to students who are coming from NYU or USC or UCLA film and television programs, because what a Notre Dame student is bringing to our industry is something that we don't see a lot, and we need more of. You know, I always say that Hollywood is a mission field, and there are a lot of hurting, lonely, broken people who may have a hit television show on the air, who may have been a part of a #1 movie at the box office this weekend, or they're making a lot of money, but there's something on the inside that they have a void and they don't know how to fill, and they need people like us in our industry to either minister to them, to listen to them, to encourage them, to hug them, and to also be good at their jobs in our industry. And so Notre Dame prepares them for the work part and the other side of it. So it's more about just, oh, I want to direct, I want to write, I want to act. It's also, I want to be a part of this industry to really be a vessel and to be God's hands and feet. And so I really remind Notre Dame students that this is what they bring to the table. They have so much to offer, and it's really good. I don't know. It's really you know, people helped us when we were starting out, and it's really nice to be able to give back to the students who are looking for work or a way to break into our business.
And not to say we have it all figured out.
Not at all.
But and not to diss NYU students, because I went to NYU. But there's a character element about Notre Dame that's undeniable. And what we do in our industry, everything that we touch, you guys touch, first thing you see, it's all media related, right? So it's a dominant industry that affects everyone worldwide. It's a powerful industry. And storytelling and media, those are powerful tools that I feel we need to harness in a serious way. So typically, I often say, like, Notre Dame is a very middle management business school, right? Well, there is the business of entertainment that is the #1 export out of America now. It's the biggest industry in our country. We need us to have our hands in it and on it to shape what is going through whatever outlets and reaching you and all of our children in very profound ways. So we need to be that next generation of storytellers who do it at the highest level that Notre Dame students will do anyway. But beyond that, there is a character element of being ND that I think is necessary and needed in our industry. So, I mean, without overly preaching about it, it is what it is. Let's just have more of us getting our hands dirty in that process so that what we think and believe also is part of the narrative.
I want to acknowledge you for the film. Like, I totally got moved watching it. I was not expecting you to be booing it. Like, but I got present to, like, coming to Notre Dame, why I came to Notre Dame, and my time here and my struggles here as a person of color coming through Notre Dame is different from my other alumni friends. And so it's refreshing to hear you talk to Notre Dame with your kids about how you want them to come here, because I have a lot of alumni friends of color who discourage their children from coming to Notre Dame because of the struggles that you go through the 4 years here as a person of color. So, but it's and so I just want to acknowledge you for that. That encouraging your children to come here because of the faith aspect of the university, and not dwelling on being the one brown chocolate chip in a classroom and having to and having that discourage them from becoming a legacy here. Sure. So yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, and I thank you for being examples to my students. Because when we're showing documentary classes, these same students, these are the examples that we show them that we want them to emulate when they're making their films. And that's really important, not just from a stylistically or production level, but from a content level. I mean, when you ask a Notre Dame student, go make a documentary, go find a subject, the first thing is not going to be, legacy, a black family legacy. That's not going to be, but then when they start to think about everything outside of their own comfort zone, get outside of your own comfort zone. There's a world out there of stories that need to be told that are not about you. And that's really powerful, as well as the faith aspect of the film is extremely important, and how it touches other people. And trying to initiate that into our own students so that their films start to talk about those types of subjects. Not at the quality you have when they first start out, but they start to see, that's what it's all about. That your film doesn't have to be polished and perfect, but if it tells a story and it has a soul, if you have a soul, people will listen.
That's right.
Well, we are out of time. We have time maybe for one more question if anybody has one.
I just curious, where could we see some more of your work?
We have a website, faithfilmworks.com. And then our movies are on Amazon Prime, actually.
Yeah, Amazon Prime.
So if you were to look us up, 2 of our feature films are now on Amazon Prime.
Yep, and you can also purchase our films on Amazon. And on for the studio things that I'm involved with, my shows are on NBC. I oversee production for shows like The Good Place, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is coming to NBC, Good Girls is on NBC. Master of None is a show that I work on that is on Netflix, but Universal Television produces that. Maybe it'll be back in a year or so. And Maury Povich is in syndication everywhere.
And then on the independent side, when I can steal Michael away from his real job, we try to make independent films as well. And I don't do faith-based films, despite what our company says, but this is indie. You cannot help being who you are. So there's always a spiritual thumbprint to my storytelling. And we're just trying to do that on an independent level as well. So we have projects in the pipeline, but our biggest projects to date are children who are 9, 12, 15, and 17. So that's a full-time gig in and of itself.
Great. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.